Right, back with you now here on the Newsfeed Late Night. As South Africa celebrates Human Rights Day on March 21st, there are concerns of repeated incidents of adults and the state failing to uphold their duty as caregivers to protect the rights of children. Boitumelo Masepa joins us now, Communications Officer for Section 27, to talk a little bit more about this. Boitumelo, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight. You're saying adults and the state in particular are failing in their duty, their constitutional duty to protect children. How so?
Thank you so much, Tabo, for having me on your show this evening. Yes, that is correct. As Human Rights Day approaches and we have an opportunity to reflect on our progress towards the realization of human rights, Section 27 and the Center for Child Law note with concern repeated incidents of children's rights being violated by those who have a responsibility to take care of them. This week, a story made news of a child in Eastern Cape, a school in Eastern Cape, whose principal forced him to go into a pit toilet to look for his phone. This child was made to undress and then lowered by his peers, ultimately suffering humiliation and, of course, trauma, and, of course, such inhumane and ill treatment by someone who's in charge of taking care of him.
It's an appalling story. I mean, and I just read that a child being forced to undress, brought down by a rope and to search through the sewer to get to the phone. Yeah, the principal has been suspended and going through disciplinary action. But one has got to ask, what is behind this glaring disregard of the rights of the child? I mean, I don't even call it failure. I mean, it's barbaric.
Yes, that is true, Tabo. Section 27 and the Center of Child Law are completely appalled by the actions of this principal. But it's not just this principal that we note with concern. We are concerned as well by other educators and others who have a responsibility of taking care of children. Section 27, together with the Center for Child Law, continue to also receive reports of children who are being physically assaulted by their teachers in school whilst attending school. This is through being subjected to corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is, by the way, a discipline measure that was outlawed in 1996. So amongst everyone who has a duty to protect children, we are seeing and noting these incidences where adults, and as well as the state, we are saying as well as the state, are failing really to protect children's rights, bearing in mind that children's rights are human rights, and the Bill of Rights gives explicit protection to children's rights because children are the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah. Now, although governments, I suppose, in the world, if you ask them, they would agree that protecting children's rights is the right thing to do. However, does that translate when it comes to government action in the various nations, but in particularly in South Africa?
So in South Africa, we note more especially government's lack of urgency to deal with the situation of pit toilets. Over 3,000 schools continue to use pit toilets in public schools across the country. As you know, these toilets are dangerous, unsafe, and every year reports and incidents of children dying in these toilets surface. And really a lack of urgency to eradicate these toilets, which were banned in 2013, and then promises by government were made to eradicate them completely by 2016, were not fulfilled. And then how can we begin to talk about and say that we are a nation that protects our children's rights, yet we have all these incidences piling up?
Now, I mean, besides having tested and proven strategies in place, for example, the WHO saying we've got these strategies, they are in place on how we can protect the children, their health and their well-being. What are governments doing? I mean, talk to us about what strategies are in place, if there are any at all.
I think the first kind of the central place to begin is the Constitution, particularly Section 28 of the Bill of Rights, which is very explicit about the need for government and caregivers to protect children from neglect, maltreatment, abuse, and violence. When we're talking about and referring to incidences of corporal punishment, there are also specific policies and laws that refer to the need to protect learners in a school environment from being assaulted. And this includes Section 10 of this Children's Act.
Yeah. What alternative programs do we have in the country? Modification programs, for example, that have got to deal with teachers who still believe in corporal punishment and who say, look, we grew up disciplining kids this way, and when you take this away from us, we have no other alternative, and hence you're seeing the lawlessness in schools, for example, kids coming to school with weapons, teachers unable to control that situation. And they say, well, give us a modification program, an alternative of how do we bring about discipline.
It is true that there are many teachers who might rely on the fact that corporal punishment is a method of discipline that they've been exposed to and they think is effective. But ultimately, we know from research and psychologists that corporal punishment, more than anything, does more harm than good. It affects the self-esteem of learners, makes them less likely to enjoy being at school. And in any case, whether a teacher is keen to or to change their ways, ultimately it's against the law. So when a teacher then does resort to corporal punishment, they are breaking a law. And what we are saying is that institutions like the South African Council for Educators and the Department of Education need to take more seriously in enforcing this law and dealing with teachers who break this law. Teachers can resort to other measures of discipline. We know that mediation works better. We know that actually, highlighting to learners where they've gone wrong and where they're misbehaving works far better and has far better outcomes than exposing them and subjecting them to violence and assault.
Yeah. Monitoring and evaluation, WHO saying very crucial in this process of determining whether or not the measures we are putting in place to protect our kids are effective, but also are delivered at the time when they are needed. How far are we as far as that is concerned? I mean, what do we do? How often, for example, do we evaluate our strategies in our schools, whether they are effective, and where are we reporting those findings?
Yes, so for instance, the Household General Survey gives annual indication of where we're at in terms of corporal punishment. It gives an indication of the number of learners who experience corporal punishment. In 2019, this was nearly 1 million learners who reported that they experienced corporal punishment. So we know this is a prevalent issue. Institutions like SACE, more particularly as a custodian of the teaching profession, have an explicit duty to then take seriously those numbers and to then train their educators, their employees, how to better deal with discipline in the classroom. It's unfortunate, however, that institutions like SACE do not take seriously this duty and are not seriously punishing and penalizing teachers who are going against the teachers' ethics, but also laws that have been affirmed by the Constitution and the Constitutional Court.
Yeah, we're talking here about changing and creating a physical environment that is safe, so changing the norms as far as the values that teachers have and caregivers in general have. But let's talk then further about what you were talking about, the creating a physically safe environment. The question of pit latrines, there is a target of eradicating pit latrines that keeps moving. I mean, have we finally set a firm target on when pit latrines will be removed in our schools?
Absolutely. So pit latrines were first outlawed in 2013. Government then made a promise to say that by 2016 they would have completed the eradication of pit latrines. This, unfortunately, was not delivered. We still see that over 3,000 schools rely on pit latrines for sanitation. And this is what part of the problem is, that government is not taking urgently the need to deal with the sanitation infrastructure in schools and to eradicate pit latrines. This is an issue that Section 27, Equal Education and partners and including Center for Child Law have been persistently bringing up and mentioning that we cannot keep moving the goalposts as to when pit latrines will be eradicated, because each year we do, learners continue to die at the bottom of these pit toilets.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the response, improving the response and the support for victims. I mean, do we have enough places where kids can go and voice out their concerns and feel like they can be safe there to say exactly what they're going through?
Yes, your observations are correct. It is part of the ambivalence in the country around the issue of corporal punishment is also owed to the fact that people don't really know that it is illegal, and learners in particular, as well as parents, are not really aware of where to report these incidents, where they can go for help. So to just give that information now, you can report an incident of corporal punishment to the Department of Education. You can report to the South African Council for Educators. You can also report to the police. And then there are other institutions and bodies and agencies that have been established and have carry out duties of protecting the rights of children, including the Department of Social Development and other child protection agencies.
Now, as we speak of the Human Rights Day this coming week, how far are we from the goal of ending violence against children?
Ultimately, it remains that children's rights continue to be violated, and there's a great deal of work that needs to be done to take the rights and the protection of children's rights more especially seriously by everyone who has a responsibility to take care of children. As I've said, children are the most vulnerable in our society. And until we can protect them and ensure that those who violate their rights serve the right penalties, we are coming short of our goal for human rights.
Do we have a developed implementation action plan, right? Something that, for example, the nation has come up with when it comes to gender-based violence. Do we have one specifically aimed at children with set goals, for example?
So there are, like I've said, there's the Constitution, and then there are other policies and laws that South Africa is a part of, including, for instance, the United Nations body for children's rights. And all of these treaties and laws are very clear on the kind of what we need to be doing to secure children's rights in our countries, but also throughout the world.
All right, I appreciate your time. What action, Boitumelo, must I say, I mean, are you going to be taking to, for example, accelerate the action that needs to be taken to protect the children as you are raising these issues with us tonight?
Yes, so earlier this year, Section 27 released a statement indicating that we will be taking legal action against the Council for Education to take their, in particular, two incidents of corporal punishment back to the courts to review the penalties that were given on those two teachers. And through this action, we want to set a precedent to really implore them to take more seriously how they deal with corporal punishment incidents. Section 27 and partners are also continue to work on the issue of sanitation, and we will be intending to pursue the structural interdict at the Limpopo High Court now in the upcoming months.
Boitumelo, thank you very much for your time, for joining us tonight here on the Newsfeed Late Night. That's the Communications Officer at Section 27. When we